Hey guys, this is Ron. Kind of like to put together a lab that does some of the CME features or Call Manager Express features that you'll find in Packet Tracer. So I know this isn't specifically 640-802 CCNA material, but there's enough other material in here that you can really kind of brush up on your skills while trying some other features. So let's kind of jump right into it. We'll grab a router. So the 2811 has CME on it. We'll grab a switch, 2960, drag those to the side, and we'll throw up some actual devices. So we'll say we have two offices right now. Guys are working off of laptops, and they both have IP phones. And they need to be able to call from one office to the other. All right. So we'll do it small scale here. Bring up our connections. We'll bring fast Ethernet to our PC port. Fast Ethernet PC port. We'll take our switch port and take it over to the switch. Switch port over to the switch. On the phone, we're going to have to add the inline power module because we don't have PoE. Inline power module. We'll take the computer and set it to DHCP. Take the computer and set it to DHCP. Alright, last cable connection. We're going to take one of our last ports here and we're going to bring it up to fast ether 01. Alright, so that'll be our trunk. Alright, so let's go ahead and configure up our switch. Make it pretty easy. We'll just do a basic configuration here. So config T, host name. We'll call this site 1 switch. Alright. Now we'll go ahead and configure up our ports for our access devices. So we'll do a switch port. No, let's do it. Interface range FA 0/1 through 23. Switch port mode access. Spanning tree port fast. Alright, so those ports should come up quickly now. Switch port access VLAN 10. So our computers will be on VLAN 10. Switch port voice VLAN 20. So our voice devices will be on VLAN 20. Alright, we'll do an interface FA 0/24. Switch port mode trunk. Alright, and that's it for the switch for now. Bring up our router, and this is where the majority of the configuration will be. So no for a configuration dialog. Enable config T. Host name, we'll call this site 1 router. Alright. We'll go ahead and configure up our sub interfaces for the trunk. So interface FA 0/1, no shut. Interface FA 0/1 decimal 10. So I'm calling this sub interface 10 because it's going to carry VLAN 10. So encapsulation .1q and label tag these as VLAN 10. IP address 192.168.0.1 255.255.255.0. We'll keep that pretty wide open. We'll do interface FA 0/1 decimal 20. So now this is going to be for our voice users. So encapsulation, if I could spell, encapsulation.1q. We'll tag it as VLAN 20. IP address 172.16.0.1 255.255.255.0. Alright, so the two sub interfaces are up. We're green across the board as far as layer 1 because we did a no shut. So we're good there. So now let's go ahead and implement our loopback address. Interface loopback 0. So this is a logical address. We'll just give it an IP address of 10.0.0.1, 255.255.255.255. Now, typically you would add this IP address for a number of reasons. You might be using it for OSPF. You might be using it for other routing protocols. You might be using it for as your the IP that you'll allow Telnet to come into, what have it. You can use it for a lot of different things. In our case, typically with CME, you use this address as your TFTP server. So when you set up TFTP on this router for the firmware files for the phone, that's the address that the phones are going to reach out to. So when you set up your DHCP server or your DHCP pool for your voice users, you end up pointing them to this address. So when they come up DHCP, they know where to reach out to get their firmware files. However, this is packet tracer, so this isn't the real world. So if I do show flash, I don't have firmware files on here for my phones. Typically, I would load up, whatever types of phones I have on the network, I would load them up on my router. But in packet tracer, you don't need all of that. So anyway, we'll go ahead and jump into our DHCP configuration. So IP DHCP pool data, network 192.168.0.0, 255.255.255.0. Okay, so that network is the same network that our VLAN 10 is using. So for default router, we're going to go ahead and point them to VLAN 10. Or sub-interface 10 basically. So 192.168.0.1. And then I'm not going to worry about a name server because I'm just trying to get basic VoIP up here. I'm not too worried about the data users. So we'll do IP DHCP pool voice. And we'll call this network 172.16.0.0, 255.255.255.0. And then again, we need to point this to subinterface 20 this time. So default router 172.16.0.1. And here's where we kind of diverge. For our VoIP users, we give them an option 150 IP. Now we point them basically to the TFTP server that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to use the loopback address. Okay. And that's it. And again, there's no real files on here, so I'm not having to do, I think it's TFTP-server, and you're not in DHCP mode, so you do exit TFTP, so it doesn't even look like this thing has it. So TFTP server, and then you would put flash, colon, and whatever files that you were serving up there. All right. I don't think it's IP TFTP. Yeah, I think it's just TFTP, and it's just not a feature here on Packet Tracer. So let's not worry about that too much. So now that we have our DHCP pools set aside, we'll do an end, show IP DHCP binding, and what we should see here is great. We have two 192 addresses, so that's our VLAN 10, so that's our two laptops out there. And now we have these two entries for 172. These are our phones. Now, typically, this would be the time where we would go ahead and set up ePhones. But I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but Packet Tracer kind of takes care of that for you. But before we even get into that, we need to specify a telephony, or how about config t telephony service. All right, so in here, we're going to specify the number of ePhones that we want to be able to support and the number of directory numbers that we want to be able to support. And you don't want to put really high numbers if you're not going to be using that many phones, because typically you eat up memory in your router that way. So we'll just do a max ePhone, and it does 1 through 42 here in Packet Tracer. I'm just going to do 3, even though I only have 2 phones out there. So then we'll do a max directory number, also 3. And then one more thing we need to do is this IP source address. So we're going to be basically pointing the phones to the CME service that we want them to use. In our case, we're going to use the loopback address because we're going to house the CME on this local router. Oh, forgot. And it's going to ask for a port, and I use port 2000. Okay? So that's all we have to specify in the telephony service. Now if we do show ePhone, typically you wouldn't see anything right away here, but notice we already have an entry, and that entry is because Packet Tracer just automatically puts it in. In the real world, you're not going to see anything at this point. Okay? What you need to do is take the MAC address of the phone, and you can find that in a couple different places. On the back of the phone, there's a sticker. You can take that MAC address. On the phone itself, let me bring one of these phones up. I don't think it lets me do it here in Packet Tracer, but basically you would hit the settings button, and then there's a couple different menus, and you can go down into the IP configuration and look at the MAC address. Okay, so those are typically how you do it in the real world. But you can also do it like we did before, where you looked up in the IP DHCP pool and saw it there. You can also, last place is when we did the, let me see, was it in here? Show CDP neighbor detail. Okay, it doesn't show it here in Packet Tracer, but again, in the real world, when you do a show CDP neighbor, instead of just being IP phone, they'll be like SEP and then the MAC address, so SEP and then the MAC address. Okay, so you can kind of find it out there too. So there are multiple places to find out the MAC address of the phone. And lastly, the box that the phone came in typically also has the MAC address on it as well. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do a do show run. And in Packet Tracer, again, it adds some stuff there for you. It added these two ePhone entries with the MAC address. Now, in the real world, that doesn't happen. Okay, you have to specify ePhone 1, ePhone 2, the MAC address, all that kind of information. So it put a little bit in there, but it's not enough to get it running. So we'll go ahead and specify our directory numbers. So we'll do a ePhone-DN. And you need to specify which, just give it like a label or a number. All right, so this is ePhone down 1, and we're going to give it number 1000. Okay, then we'll do an ePhone-DN2, number 2000. Okay. Okay, so now we have two directory numbers that we can use on our ePhones. And to map our phones to it, we're going to go to ePhone 1. So this is the first one. And we're going to do a button. Now, there are two ways to specify it. So in this case, he's doing two lines into for this phone. So line 1, line 2, and then mapping it to directory number 2 and directory number 5. In my case, I'm only going to map it to one line and one directory number. Or one line, and I'm going to directory number 1. Now, one other thing that you typically do in the real world as well is specify a type. All right, and so here we're going to specify the type of phone that you have. In this case, we only have 7960 in Packet Tracer. 7960. Okay. Now we'll do a ePhone 2. We'll do a button. So line 1, and we're going to map it to directory number 2. And then we'll give it a type 7960. All right. So here in a second, there we go. We see that it has registered. Okay. So now when we do show ePhone, we have two entries. It's got their MAC addresses. It says they're registered. It shows their IP address, the type of phone, all that kind of good stuff. So if we've done everything right, we should be able to bring our phone up here. We have a directory number of 1000. We'll call 2000. All right, so we ring out. Bring up my other phone here. I've got an incoming call from 1000. Open it up and we are connected. I will go ahead and send do. So that's like the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And there we go. We're playing do. All right, so that's pretty much it. That was setting up DHCP pools. That was building sub-interfaces, building a trunk, adding an access VLAN, and adding a voice VLAN, setting our stuff up for DHCP, setting up telephony service here, and then also specifying the ePhone and ePhone directory numbers. So once that was complete, now we can make a phone call from one phone to the other. So hope you got something out of the lab, and I'd appreciate any kind of feedback you got. Thanks for watching.